All right, let's see how, for those of you that aren't in this class, at least taking it for a grade, one of the practices we have been doing as a class is deep listening to our neighbor, both weekly and last week. We talked a lot about that. So let's see if some of you that met somebody new could introduce some of our new people. This will be a test, right? They didn't know that this was happening. So anybody be willing? Okay, Sharon. Yep.
This is Minty. He's a senior at Luther College.
Oh, welcome.
And majoring in business, which is the best major
Ever
for talking to an accountant. For a pre-seminary person, so you don't have to major in religion or science.
Awesome. Tell me your name. His name again.
Lindsay.
Lindsay. Yep. Yep. Okay. Sorry, missed that. Yep.
So I chatted with Chris, and she is assistant. She currently is underneath the and then have previously, what was it? Community education. And it's gonna hopefully study in an program. Want to make it a little bit more broad than just CYF, but
awesome.
Feeling I call the seminary nonetheless.
Good. Awesome. Welcome. Who else? We were all talking to people. Don't be shy. Yeah, Aretha.
I met Corey.
Right here? Okay. Yep.
And she's looking for a retreat.
Yep.
And thinking about coming to Utah, either to do MBA or become, some of them want to be pastors.
Yeah.
Want to be
good.
But it's just an observation.
Yeah.
So she's here for that.
Awesome. And Aretha didn't get a chance to come visit. We just sent her here, right? So you can see she's got her layers on for winter, right? We're helping a few of our students learn winter, right?
Yeah.
This is one of them. So nice job. Thank you. Welcome. Thank you. All right. Who else?
So I had.
You met several people.
I turned the tables around.
Oh, no way. You would do that? Okay.
Yeah, sure. So I knew that most of the Luther seminary students were going to ask for information.
Yes.
So I provided information.
Good for you.
Why I like this class, the context in which I studied, why is this class important?
Oh.
So
nice.
I try to win people.
Did you? He might. He knows there's a paper due next week. He might be trying to win the professor over too. I'm not sure. Right? He might be pulling a base of that. All right. Who got to speak with Venetius? All right.
My name's Natalie Pearson.
Good to meet you. Natalie and I've talked on the phone, but I've never seen her in person. Good to see you. Nice to see you as well.
So I'm from Des Moines, Iowa, and I'm here with the rest of the crew checking out Luther.
Yeah, awesome. Welcome. All right. Anybody else willing to share what they learned from their new partner?
Yeah.
Stephanie over here. All right.
This is Kira, and she's from Faribault, Minnesota. I don't know where that is, but that's great.
South.
Yeah.
And she's
not quite to Iowa though.
Possibly doing an MA, maybe doing something towards becoming a deacon.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Welcome. All right. Megan's here. You want to, Corla, can you introduce Megan?
Not while I'm muted, I can't.
Yeah, she was muted.
Yes, I can. So Megan is here. Megan's a student in Winona who's currently finishing up undergrad and is looking at either United Seminary, which is the Gettysburg, Philadelphia merger thing. That's not a merger, but we call it something else. Or Luther, and feeling a call to seminary and just doing some good discernment on campus this week.
Awesome. And did I hear she was from Grand Forks? Are you from Grand Forks?
Yes. Yes.
Awesome. Thank you, Corla. Welcome, Megan. All right, let's have those of you, we will quit making it painful for the rest of us. Who didn't get introduced? You two. Can you share a little bit about your name and where you're from?
So my name is Joseph. I'm from Cedar Rapids, Iowa, but I'm a senior at Luther College in Florida, Iowa right now, studying music and production as my minor.
Awesome. Welcome.
I'm Bergen Nelson. I am a youth minister over in the Cokato area of Minnesota. That's just west on US 12. And I'm a graduate of St. Olaf.
Awesome. Welcome.
I'm Jennifer Dabb. I am a senior at Augsburg University.
Oh, nice.
Youth and Family Ministry is my degree. I'll be graduating spring 2018.
Okay. Do you have Jeremy right now for professor? Will you say hello to him for me? So, heard he moved this weekend.
Yes, he did.
Yeah. Anyway.
We at his house.
Oh, her professor is a colleague of mine from seminary day or PhD days. So awesome. Good. Well, welcome. Thank you. Did everybody? Did you guys get it over here? Yeah. Just the students that this is my attendance sheet.
We had everybody sign.
That's all right. That's
I
fine.
guess they needed that.
Okay. Awesome. All right. Anybody else? Did we get everybody? All right. Awesome. Just so you that don't know, we have two students that join us from, Missouri. Corla, are you in Missouri today?
Yes, I'm back in St. Louis for the
Sometimes she's
duration.
not in St. Louis, even though that's where she lives. And then one that's down in Texas, so on internship. So these are. Then we have one from North Carolina that watches us online. So this is welcome to the new world, right? Of how it goes. So today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about paradigms of leadership. But for those of you and that are new and those of you that aren't in this class, I'm going to talk about what this class is. So in case you forgot what we've been doing now that we're 10 weeks in, this is a good reminder, right? So Luther Seminary has what we call signature courses, which are courses that the MAs and the MDivs all take, that are kind of the core. They're not introductory courses. They're not like, this is not an overview of leadership, but it's kind of our signature of what are our core commitments around what we think and around leadership. And this one is called Leading Christian Communities in Mission. Now, there's a couple things that we mean by that. One is, notice it's not leading congregations in mission, because not everybody in this room is going to be leading a congregation. And so it's a more broad kind of understanding of what Christian communities might entail, or there might be some places that have, like you were studying the group with Redeemer, that's kind of a nonprofit arm of a congregation, right? So it's a Christian ministry, but it's really not a congregation. It's kind of an experiment maybe at the moment. What would you describe it, V?
I don't think it's an experiment because it's already successful.
But is it a nonprofit establishment?
I would say it's a subdivision of Redeemer.
Yeah.
Because they operate right from
But it's not like centered in a worshiping community about word and sacrament kinds of things. It's a real different kind of experiment.
It's just done different because there is we do a lot of being the sermon.
Yeah.
So
that's a good way to say it.
And we go out and do stuff for the community, and they integrate conversations, and we do speak of God. It's really all surrounded about God. It's just everybody is allowed to express it in their own artistic way, and then we do have time that we stop to get together and break bread together.
Yeah.
And get into that.
Awesome, thank you. So that's an example of, we kind of believe the world is changing in the kind of ways that we'll gather and do ministry. So one of the things at this course is that every student has to have a context that they're working with, and then they do a 3-part paper in studying that and the neighborhood and things like that. So that's why Bees is kind of an interesting one that she's studying. So we don't say congregations, we say Christian communities in a broader way. We also have a theological commitment that today, to be a part of leading Christian communities, you have to have a missional understanding of both who God is. This is a theological endeavor, not just a ministry or like programmatic kind of expression of what we are. And so we've spent a lot of time thinking theologically about that, looking at the church over time, and both how history has kind of put mission as compartmentalized it, maybe as a missions, as an expression of activity, as opposed to how we all are within that. So we've talked about that. And now we're turning towards to leadership, which is the last piece of what this is. Is that fair? And is there anything important that we missed? We kind of have fun sometimes. It sometimes happens, right? We have very different perspectives. Let's just, for a show of hands, if you are a lifelong Lutheran, raise your hand. We've got 1.5 online, all right? All right, put your hand down. If you are not from the United States, raise your hand. Okay. If you are not a lifelong Lutheran, raise your hand. All right. Means you didn't grow up in the Lutheran church. All right. All right. If you're not a Lutheran at all and never want to be a Lutheran, raise your hand. All right. How many of you are in some process of leadership in the Lutheran church, but did not grow up in the Lutheran church? Yeah.
When you say process of leadership,
Well, it could be candidacy, but I'm trying to say open beyond candidacy. Joe, you are welcome to the Lutheran Church, candidacy or not.
I'm good.
Joe is an example of that broader sense. So, is that fair, Joe? I wanted to include you.
I felt included.
Okay. I say that only because this is not how I have degrees, 2 degrees from Luther Seminary, and when I took an equivalent to this class, this was not the makeup of people that sat in my class or online, all right? And so it's really led to some really rich conversations over the time, as well as gives us a fun imagination about what God's church is going to look like as we start to talk about that. So anyway, a little bit about that. So we start with the practice called dwelling in the Word. And here's how this practice goes. We will read this text twice, and we invite everybody to just take a deep breath and listen to this text and wonder what God is saying to you today in this text. Not what are the deep, meanings behind this text or things like that, but just to wonder and be open to God's Spirit moving in your life and in your spirit today. We'll ask 2 different people to read that, to hear 2 different voices. And then we will practice listening not only to the text, but to our neighbor. And we will partner up with somebody else and listen, say, what did you hear in this text? And then we will share what we heard. And then we will invite people to share what they heard their neighbor say with us as a whole. Okay, that's our practice of listening in the Word, or dwelling in the Word. So could I have 2 volunteers that would be willing to read? Sharon and Emily. Sharon, would you go first, and then Emily? Awesome.
That they may all be one. As you, Father, are in me, and I am in you, may they also be in us, so that the world may believe that you have sent me. The glory that you have given me, I have given them, so that they may be one as we are one, I in them and you in me, that they may become completely one, so that the world may know that you have sent me and have loved them, even as you have loved me. Father, I desire that those also whom you have given me may be with me where I am, to see my glory, which you have given me, because you loved me before the foundation of the world.
That they may all be one, as you, Father, are in me, and I am in you. May they also be in us, so that the world may believe that you have sent me. The glory that you have given me, I have given them, so that they may be one, as we are one. I in them, and you in me. That they may become completely one, so that the world may know that you have sent me and have loved them, even as you have loved me. Father, I desire that those also whom you have given me may be with me where I am, to see my glory, which you have given me because you loved me before the foundation of the world.
Thank you.
invite you to find one other person and share what you heard and listen to what they heard. I'll give you about 3 minutes. Go.
Hey.
The first one, me too.
Okay. I can't hear anything.
I barely hear anything. And then the second one is
Oh, but do you know what's fun? Can you hear me? We don't have any of our tax documents or insurance documents in PDF form. So I'm preparing PDFs made from pictures I took on my phone of the hard copies, uploaded into the Google Docs, turned into PDFs, downloaded. And of course, because, it's St. Louis and it's only 2017, these all have to be submitted in a sealed envelope on a flash drive in person at City Hall by 4 p.m.
What?
Can't email it somewhere.
Oh, that's dangerous.
Can't upload it. And they're really clear to let us know in the RFP that by giving them this flash drive, we relinquish our rights to the flash drive.
You are
Become
not
city property.
Yeah.
So don't give us your flash drive with all your birth certificate information on it. No. They are not just borrowing the flash drive from us.
Wow. Oh, St. Louis. Oh no.
Oh no is right. Both culturally and technologically. It's about 1974 here.
I hear that. Yeah. I mean, rural Texas is not much better. I haven't had to apply for any grants, but
I believe it. Yeah, I just saw your text or your chat where you said you didn't really hear anything in the text. I didn't really either because I wasn't listening. And I forgot to pee before class, so I'm a little distracted. But Fern's here. I have Fern here at work.
All right, Fern. Who's be willing to share something they heard their partner say?
Hello, puppy.
Do you have one? Oh, I'm sorry. They're sharing.
we're sharing dogs.
They are sharing dogs. I got to see it. They'll have to imagine.
She's pretty cute.
I'm sure it is. Venetius.
Joe talked about the phrases in 21 and 20. It's just the year 21 and 23, almost the end of 21, so that the world may believe. And then 23, after he has said all he wants to say, there is another so that yes, yeah, okay, 23, so that the world may know. So his argument is that the passage is so interwoven in that whatever glory that Jesus has received from the Father is purposely that his followers may also receive it. So he received it so that we may receive, so that the world may believe, so that the world may know. So it's purpose driven. It's not just
Thank you.
For Christine, this passage is really dating her. She says it reminded her of when she was my age. They used to sing the song, "We are one in the Spirit, we are one in the Lord."
We could sing it. But that reminds me of what I heard Rebecca say, in the sense of there's a poem here, or there's a flow that kind of comes from this. And she said it was almost like a prayer, you know, that. So I think that kind of gets at that, right? Yeah. Nice. Yeah. Johnny.
About the image of unity and Trinity.
Ah.
And you said that we are called.
Yeah. So that image is what calls us.
We are called to love one another. Be one. So that kind of love and intimacy.
Yeah. Nice. Thank you. Yeah. Lupos.
Question of what is the glory that Creator God gives to Jesus, and if the glory is the climbing the cross, then it is the co-suffering with one another, in climbing each other's crosses and the fullness of those crosses that can create a reality of oneness beyond conceptual unity or songs about unity. But if we jump to resurrection and miracles and healing without the cross, then it remains word on.
Thank you. Anybody else want to share? Yeah.
I guess I just kind of like had maybe a wondering or a question. I think it was one of our readings for today. Is it Van Gelder?
Yeah.
I think in that reading they maybe talked about us being in God.
Yes.
And so I guess that's just kind of a foreign concept to me, because usually you hear it the other way of like God is in you. And so I just thought of that reading in relation to this.
Yeah. Yeah. What does it mean to be in God?
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. Good thought. Awesome. Well, let us pray. Gracious and loving God, we come before you today acknowledging that this is a pretty far out there concept. To be one, to be in you, to wonder about what your glory is and what is it that we're being drawn into. Lord, in these days when we are so aware of communities that are broken, including many of our congregations and Christian communities where oneness is not how we experience each other. We hope and we pray, we cling to these words, and we invite you to show us, to guide us into those places where we are joined with you, that you are in us and we are in you, and that the world may know who you are and what your love is. All this we pray in your name. Amen. All right. Last week, 2 weeks ago, we participated in an event, some of us, called the No Joke Project. And by the way, the 3 practices that we talked about, I have them on cards if anybody wants to pick up. I have a few more that I realize are sitting on my desk if anybody wants those. I also have some copies of the book if any of you want to get a hold of those up here, and some DVDs, if those of you that want to get those. And the link is on our website now, the link to the actual evening. So if any of you want to watch that. So I got it the day after our class last week. So, but in that no joke, would somebody be willing to just describe what the no joke was? Mary, would you be willing to share about the no joke event that we went to, that we participated in right as she took a bite? I'm sorry. I didn't mean, I'm not trying to catch you. Just because you're articulate, Mary. No pressure.
So,
Yeah.
it was a wonderful conference gathering of three very unlikely friends to the absolute most beautiful definition of the word friend. Imam, rabbi, and evangelical preacher, I think it was. And it was teaching about how we can look at the missional church conversation and what it means to actually fulfill the steps that are necessary to strengthen, remain in a setting such as that. The three of them not only are friends, but their families, their spouses, their children know each other. They're able to be in conversation with one another, respecting and honoring the differences, and knowing their boundaries, their limits, not changing who they are or foregoing their values to be in relationship with someone who's very different in religious issues. And so they were able to do a wonderful Q&A session and share how they became friends. I think they're from Peoria area.
Yep, Peoria, Illinois. Yep, that's where they met. They don't all live there now, but.
And they travel, they speak together, on different speaking engagements, where they go out and speak. And so it's a wonderful representation of, as we as Christians would say, God's love. Jesus is an example of unity. And so they are people that you might want to really take a look at the book or the DVD, if you have access to the video on the video. But just an example of what can happen in ministry when you're so different.
Yeah. Thank you, Mary. See, she was articulate. I thought, yeah. And from that, see, Mary, you fulfilled what I thought you would do. From that, they suggest three practices on how, or three things about what they are. Is they say, I'll practice being unusually interested in others. So not just being in a relationship to kind of figure out what you can get out of it, but actually just being curious about another person for the sake of their humanity, right? I'll practice staying in the room with difference. So when we have points where we don't agree or we don't understand, rather than just say, I don't get it and shutting down, staying in that relationship. And then the last one is, I'll stop comparing my best with your worst. So the sense that giving each other grace to be who they are and sticking together. So then we practiced a way to listen to each other. And we divided this crazy lot of people into 3 different groups and had some conversation. So what I would like you to do, and let's do it in triads, if you would be willing. So let's have one of our guests join a dyad of people that were here, right, last time, and talk about what was affirming about the exercise we did. What pushed you out of your comfort zone, or where were parts that you found yourself really having to work at to live into that? What struck you after, like, I always wonder about what are the things that, like, 2 days later you're still wondering about or thinking about. Was there anything like that happened last week that you, or I thought, I just remembered that person and thought about them or whatever. And what leadership lessons, since today we're going to talk about leadership, what did you learn about leadership from that? Okay. Stacy, would you be willing to meet with our online folks? Is that okay, guys? And then I'll put you guys out in the hall, then it won't be quite so loud. It's not a punishment. Sorry, that sounds really bad. All right. How about you guys pair up and then come invite one of our new friends to join you. Okay? Go. You just, somebody will find you.
We're gonna get invited.
There you go. It's just so loud in here. Yep. Hi, ladies.
Hello, Miss Stacy. I'm just bragging to Corla about this quilt that I'm making for Jess and Heather. And this is, I started cutting it up, but this is the fabric.
Ooh.
How Jess Olsen is that? Right?
Very.
It's like flowers and it's orange.
Oh. How was your trip back?
It was good. It was good. It was really fun to be home. And then I was like, oh, now I got to come back. And that's okay. Sunday was crazy, and I like worked all day, and then got a message late at night that the mother of one of our parishioners got air flighted to Houston. So my supervisor is out of town still. So I'm,
Of course she is.
on the job.
Of course she is. I'll stop talking about selling drugs then.
You can talk about it. I just want to warn you. That's all.
No, thank you for the heads up. I got an open case, so I'm gonna shut up.
All right. Let's start looking at the first three questions. We'll save the leadership one for last. But what was affirming, pushed you, or stuck with you? Those of you that participated last week. Ian.
So we had the luxury of having a small group that was very open, and so we had a lot of personal experiences there that includes like pain and suffering or experiences that were kind of set against the grain. And so what pushed me out of my comfort zone and stuck with me really was that we've interacted with each other in class. And then we kind of surprisingly, there was a precedent set early on that it was a format that we could be open and honest. And I guess I didn't really expect to go into that situation and both share some personal things and also hear some personal things. That was definitely not what I was expecting out of the experience. And then what stuck with me through that was we entered into this conversation with people that I know but don't know deeply or don't interact with every day. And then we get very personal, and we had this really healthy conversation, life-giving conversation. And then the next day goes by, and then a week goes by, and then now we're sitting in class again. And I know, we've identified with one another, and I know some of their story, but now we're kind of just continuing on as we were before. So like, what do you do with that sense of connectedness?
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, that
nice. Thank you. Just walk. You don't have to
for
sneak.
student admissions. I emailed you about it.
It's all good. You go.
Be back.
Joe doesn't sneak very well. That was my point, right? Just do it. Right? Yeah.
I just want to do it again. I want us to break into groups again and let's do it. Rotate around.
Yeah.
Because it was such a to stop and not be allowed to comment, but to ask questions. Not to contribute what you thought, but say, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? I think I really got to know people.
Were you in Ian's group?
No.
So we have at least two groups. Two people from two different groups. That's my point, right? That came away from that. Yeah, Haley.
I was in Ian's group.
Okay.
Something that stuck with me is how active the listening was. Because there's like, I would kind of maybe consider like a little bit of the passive listening of like, yeah, go on. But this was very much like paying attention to what they were saying so that you could ask a clarifying question and like truly giving them your 100% attention. And that was also affirming to me because sometimes I struggle to feel heard by friends who will be like texting while I'm trying to tell them something. So it was affirming to me how active the listening was, and that really did stick with me.
So both as the person sharing and as the person listening.
Yeah.
It was a different experience. Thank you. Yeah, Mary.
So I think what I would like to pass on, especially for our visitors, is I think we all would probably anticipate a difficult meeting to in the field of ministry somewhere along the way. So one thing we talk about how people were able to hear each other, learn about each other, kind of make a connection that way. But what I saw that was so helpful in how it was set up in advance so that everyone in attendance then would be willing to follow those guidelines that were set up for us to follow. And so I'd like to just speak on that just quickly. For example, one was, I think you all have already picked up on that there were discussions based on what's important to another. So that's a very passionate, very sensitive area. But if it's not handled properly in a meeting, that can break up a ministry process right there. And resentment can linger. And so all of that was avoided just by a few simple steps that were given in advance. For example, when the facilitator says, and we can use this so at home, even I have other words, when the facilitator or whoever is in charge in whatever capacity says, thank you, that simply means that you have maybe spoken enough and it's a polite way to do that. And if we all are in agreement in advance of hearing that, then it works. And then the other one is when there is a clarifying question before someone says something, instead of going in after them if you don't agree, then the person who made the statement originally has 2 minutes to speak. The person who has the clarifying question has 20 seconds. And then, was it 20 seconds?
Yep.
I think it was. And then if the original person wants to respond to the question, they have 2 minutes yet again. And then if there's another clarifying question from someone else or the same person, another 20 seconds for the question, which avoids some of these meetings that we've had where people, they believe they're asking a question, but they're giving a testimony. And if there is to be a very long speech or something that they're venting about. And so I think that type of anticipation of order was extremely helpful, and I found to be very useful in the ministry setting as well as in myself.
Thank you. Yeah.
I want to focus on diversity and openness. In our group, we are from Tanzania, Egypt, and South Korea, from America. But our perspectives was so different, and our passion area was so different. In the midst of diversity, we open our heart, listen to others' stories. So I felt like, focus on openness and diversity in the midst of diversity.
Thank you. Anybody else want to share what? What was it like to move from that conversation into celebrating communion or coming together in prayer and communion? Did that matter? Did it not matter? Did it ruin it? Did it? Yeah, Sharon.
It definitely enhanced it.
Okay.
Like I said, that was the culminating
For you.
point of it when we were sharing just now. She mentioned that was for her really, and I thought it was wonderful too. And I don't think our group, when we did it in practice last week, went as far as the group that we watched at No Joke went in terms of really taking it to a level where what I'm saying that is passionate for me might be offensive to somebody else. We kind of stayed in but I think that if we were all dealing with things that might really be offensive, it would be so even more of a blessing. I thought the way in which we went with baptism and communion was amazing.
Well, I appreciated it a lot, and the reason for that is it was the question of why are we doing this exercise? We're not just doing it for nothing, and we're not political scientists. We're not we're not social workers. So what makes this different in ministry? And so we can have these conversations. Yes, this is important for our community, but it doesn't end there. And so what we have then as leaders in the church is to come back to the sacraments and come back to God's promises for us that we can unite on, that we can, that it's not something that's our will, but something that's given to us. And so to end with that and to have prayer was really humbling, and then made that leap then of this is not just for this world, this is we are doing this to be God's community here on earth. That was that connection.
Yeah, good. Thank you, Rebecca. Any other people comments on just the experience? And then I want to ask about leadership questions. Yeah.
I really appreciated the communion as well, because something that I've maybe been missing since I've come here was my campus ministry in undergrad. There were only about 6 to 8 of us who would worship together every week, and so it was a very intimate experience. And we have on Wednesdays here we have 100 people, and I don't know everybody at the same, and so to connect with a group and then go into worship and communion, it kind of created that intimate space I think that I've been missing for the last year that I had experienced in undergrad. So I definitely felt more connected to our class as a community, and it just, I don't know, seemed to reflect communion with God much better.
Thank you. What are some leadership lessons that fit into where we're going in this class about listening to others, engaging neighborhoods, engaging in difference, right? Coming together across differences are a couple themes that we've been talking about. Yeah, Ian.
I think one thing that's interesting is to think about is that I'm naturally kind of an introverted person, and so if somebody wouldn't have, if you would have said that we're going to have a discussion, open discussion, and I would have taken a back seat in that discussion. But when you tell someone that they're going to be given X minutes to speak, and and it's just going to be your time, and no one else is going to be trying to add to the conversation or trying to, it's when it's all on you. And then furthering that, to have a time where clarifying questions can be asked, but it's in order to learn more about what you've said, not push what other people might be thinking about what you said. And so I think that's the intentional way, the intentional piece of telling people that we're going to invest time into hearing what you have to say. And we're
Is a leadership lesson to take.
Yeah, and lesson in leadership where there's people whose voices won't be heard
Otherwise.
unless you tell them that you are going to be listening.
Okay. Thank you, Ian. Vinicius.
Our guests are going to have to step out to their next activity.
Okay.
So if you guys want to gather your things, I can walk you over, or Stephanie can walk you over.
Either person with a Luther t-shirt and a name tag, clearly, that's your guide, right? And then Vinicius will get you. Thank you, Tim. Thanks, you guys. We actually do other stuff too. We don't just process life, but we do that too. Welcome. Enjoy.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sorry I didn't get a chat.
Yeah. What is your schedule the rest of the day? Are you done?
Yeah, they're okay.
Okay.
Okay. But we'll have to catch up. Yeah, I will. I'm really afraid
No.
and Pastor Jeremy also said, he's like,
Oh,
good. Because he did my recommendation for the pastor inspector. He said, please talk to her. She's good.
You might have some stories, about me, but
yeah, but you don't say they're true.
We'll see.
Oh, you can't leave.
All right, Vinicius, what were you going to add? Leadership lessons.
It's one thing to set the rules.
Yeah.
It's one thing to create the condition, but it's another thing altogether to provide the leadership to do exactly what the rule says. And that is what in our discussion last week I saw. Like Mary said, yes, we have all the rules laid out, we have all the policies, we have time. But it's very important that people respect the rules and the leader provides the leadership, and those who are with the leader accept to follow the rules. It makes it very important.
Yeah.
And as I was sharing with Tim and Helly, I said, after we left, I said, well, the rules were excellent, but the leader was also very superb. Because
Could it have been Mary?
yes, she was. In my observation, once your time is over, she's not going to scream. And if she says, okay, and you were still talking, she still maintained, okay. And people were prepared to live by the rules. And so what makes leadership work is not just the rules, but if we can observe the rule, it works well.
And Thank you.
And to kind of follow up on that is that I was a leader at the table, and I had to remind folks that no, you ask questions, you don't comment on what things if you ask questions. And it was hard to kind of say don't, because you felt like you're kind of gonna hurt their feelings, or and as a leader, that's a tough place to be, but it's got to be done.
Yeah, there is some guiding of the process. It's not just setting up the rules. Yeah.
And again, I don't know. It wasn't difficult at all. And I think the group just followed your instructions. I mean, you had it written out for us. And I guess if we're clear, and this is for going forward in our meetings, if we are clear about our expectations of those who gather at your table, or whatever the ministry call it, mature, responsible adults can listen, they can hear it. And I think that's what we're talking about, is that it has been tried and made true. And so all we had to do was just read and follow the steps. And that's what happened in our session. And we were able to have a safe place for people to talk about some very, very social topics. It was enjoyable.
Yes.
And we gave assent to those rules. Yes, and that partly is because the professor gave these rules for us to follow. And that you get out in, you have a church council that's contentious and divisive. I think a little about that. Let's see, how do you get them to agree on some rules of conduct? Or say, let's try this today and see, maybe let's try this today and see how it goes. But taking out of this context in a different context, and how do these rules work? How you do adapt them? What do you do if somebody doesn't follow them? Refuses to listen to the facilitator who's got the time to watch and try to get done.
If I just, and then I'm gonna start talking. We've seen it where when that happens, and it has happened, and it does happen, and it might happen again for someone, is when the majority in the room are in agreement, it tends to give you the support you need to silencing that one that is not quite in agreement. And so what the nation was talking about is when we have the opportunity to say, I'm sorry, but may we discuss that a little bit further, a little later, or may I see you later. And we make sure that we remain in our ministry role in addressing that difficulty. It works out. We just have to be consistent, firm, and understand what the expectation is and where we're headed, and stick to it. And don't let them rattle us when we come out of hand, obviously, because angry and whatever. We can't do that as ministry leaders. We have to be able to hang in there with the guidelines that we have as well. That's what we're trying to give up. Does that make sense?
Flippos and then Venetius.
I really enjoyed our group, and it also led me to think through, like, where does responsibility of facilitation lie, and how do we create community guidelines so that when I say to someone, I'm not available for this conversation right now, they don't chatter and fall apart. The issue of fragility is really big in our communities, especially those who are of mixed race and who are of difference. So how can we create a trust culture of, when I say I'm not available for this conversation right now, I'm not stabbing you in the back. I'm just not. Like, period.
And that's actually responsible. You're trying to be responsible in your piece. Let me follow up with that, and Venetius will do. I think it's kind of in a way connected what Ian was saying, is that there are times when I'm not going to put myself out there, right? I need a space, or I need something, right? And this isn't going to be that space, right? I also appreciate the flip side of where we've been going around. If we want to get below just a conversation at this level, we might need to create guidelines, right? And agreeing upon parameters and a facilitator, right? To go there. Venetius.
What I observed is that the conversation and the way it was structured from the professor to the participants helped me to appreciate more one of the readings. So yes, the two, but the one on leadership and how the authors decided to define leadership. Because I could clearly see from the discussion into the material, into the author's eyes when he wrote, how the process works in leadership. One of the issues that is raised in that reading is that the process will have to work with other people to achieve a goal. But if those people do not cooperate, it's difficult for that goal to be achieved.
And then what do we do? Right. Yeah. Very nice. Well, that's, I think, a nice segue. I'm going to make a comment and then I'm going to ask you a question. Okay, but if you want to take a break now or in a minute and go a little bit further. But I think my observation might be, I'll test this with you, that I think leading in ministries these days, we might need to do a more parameter setting, right? Setting the table, creating some places, some parameters or some guidelines and some facilitation. And not just make assumptions around walking into spaces around leadership. And I mean that on multiple levels. I mean that like council or sessions or like formal leadership, but also if we have a random team that's going to do 2 or 3 meetings, right, to pull something off, right? Anything in between. To assume that we're all on the same page to start maybe doesn't set us up for success. In the same way that doing some work ahead of time can be. And I think primarily, and I'm not going to pick on you all day, but I think to your point of saying there's more in this room than I knew. And that doesn't become available to us unless we sit and be with one another and listen and create some places that it's okay to disagree, it's okay to just be heard, all of those kinds of things. And we're going to talk later today about power and assigned positions. Some of those things are part of what this is about, but it's also about we all come with such different experiences. And so when you say you're here to serve in this role, whatever, everybody around the room may understand that differently, right? And so to figure out how to get on the same page really makes a difference. How about this? I'll share one more story and then should we take a break now and then we'll come back and move into the lecture, whatever. Okay. So some of you are aware that, I don't even know, a couple weeks ago we had bishops here, one from each region of the country. So today we had a meeting where we were just debriefing our time with them at different places. And a group of us met with them, introduced Luther's vision, and then just asked them questions for about an hour. Or just asked them 2 questions and just gave them an hour to kind of respond. And in their debrief and in our debrief, we said that was probably the most powerful, real conversations that we've had about the church with church leaders, or at least bishops, in a long time. And we were trying to wonder what that was about or whatever. But one of the things that we kind of sifted out that was meaningful is like we literally came to listen. We didn't think we knew the answer. We weren't looking for something in particular. We were trying to just say, tell us how you see the church today from your region of the country, from your experiences. And then to respond. And I thought, and we stated, this is a different posture for leadership at Luther and hosting bishops, right? But also in hosting anybody, right? In what does that mean? And so kind of committed ourselves to practice that in some new and different ways. So I say this to us, right? I'm not saying this to you, oh, when you get out there. I'm saying this is, I think, a new way we all have to imagine or have the opportunity to imagine to actually go to some new places in leadership that honor voices, that honor experiences in particular ways. And then if it's good space, people show up. People bring, or at least will test, right? If that's real, right? So thank you for, I just felt like we couldn't just let last week go. And I think, I don't know, we got a couple weeks left. I've changed some things along the way. Maybe we'll do something similar. I mean, I don't know what this means, but I would be open for conversation with how do we continue a deeper kind of conversation in the weeks that remain for this class. So let's be back at 2 to 3. Okay, 15 minutes. Okay, guys, 15 minutes.
I know. I met with my candidacy relator while I was in town to just sort of say, like, just in case you hadn't noticed, I am doing early approval.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they were like, oh, I suppose that makes sense. We should probably vote on that.
Right. Right.
Yeah, you should. You should vote on that. And really, you should just say yes.
Right. Exactly. So,
yeah.
All right. Are we ready to keep going? All right. Leadership, what is it? What I'd love us to do as we come back here is write down, you know, like this can be like on the back of your hand or just notes, you know, words on your computer or whatever. When you think of, and particularly I'm thinking of Christian public leadership, leadership in ministry, okay? When you think of leadership, what are characteristics? What is a definition? How do you frame it? So just make some mental notes, maybe write it down on paper, whatever, and we're gonna talk about them as we unfold this. And Beth, you don't have to read all the notes going forward to come back and come up with your decision. Beth has her notes all printed out. So I'm not looking for a right answer. I'm looking for when you would have to say that, what would come up. So take a minute and write some things down. Go. All right, we're going to keep going through here and we're going to come back to this as we get going. I'm going to talk about both the Northouse reading and the Ben Gelder reading today. Research findings, if you do a scan of leadership, provide a picture of a process that is far more sophisticated and complicated about leadership than we often give it credit. It's kind of like we say church and we mean 9,000 things, right? Leadership can kind of be the same thing, right? And I have gotten the pleasure of and chose to read 1,012 books on leadership. And the ones that I'm most frustrated with are the ones that make it real simplistic. And the ones that are most engaging to me are the ones that really see it as a more complicated endeavor and bring me into thinking differently about that complexity. Does that make sense? Like just in an overarching thing. And that's where I can learn from all kinds of places, right? But if it says, here's the 3 steps to this, probably is like gonna Like, I think leadership is more complicated than that. Right? Does that make sense? Like, that's just for me where it comes with. And so one of the things that I appreciate about this, and this is in its whatever edition of it, they keep kind of updating it. This version has had a couple chapters added to it. But it looks at leadership as a complex process that has multiple dimensions. And so while this is theory, it's not Christian, it's not looking at it theologically. It is looking at it as from different dimensions, and it has a bend toward, and how will this inform how we actually do stuff, right? How we actually lead people, organizations, make stuff happen. Does that make sense? Which I also value, that leadership is not just so it looks nice on paper or we have a theory. So over the past 60 years, it's also a fairly new discipline. I have colleagues here that still aren't sure leadership is a discipline. I tell them it is, but they don't always know it is. But it's a fairly new. With 60 years, there's as many as 65 different classifications. That's a lot, right? Some see leadership as a focus of group processes, and where the leader is in the center of those. Others see leadership as personality perspective or a combination of some kind of traits. Others define leadership behaviorally, or what you do, right, that bring about change to some organization or group of people. Others define it in terms of power relationships that exist between people, and others see it as skills or a transformational process. Some are hybrids, right? They bring it in. Let's see if you can give me some examples of one or two of these. Leadership ideas or concepts that you have learned over the years that fall into one of these categories.
Are these things we written down?
It could be, yeah. Like what things that have you seen, experienced, understood it, maybe from a past leadership role, right? You saw that, yeah, Ian.
From the personality perspective,
yes.
I can't remember the class, but I've done the strengths-based leadership exam or whatever several times, and so that kind of falls into the personality perspective where it looks at you as like an individual,
what you bring,
what your strengths are and where you can improve, and
where
that enables you.
And you can fill in strengths with any other kind of tools, right? The disc, those kind of things. Tim.
I think, for looking at like group processing, like serving as a mentor or a coach, as a leader, and really helping to facilitate someone else's development and participation in the system.
Right. And that would be your role as a leader is defined by then how that process goes, right? In that case, right, of coaching. Okay. What else?
You're an elected official.
Elected official, yes. And how?
You may not have the personality. You may not have the skills. You may not have, but by virtue of
position,
an election.
Yeah. I was just saying, would you put that under power?
That is the power.
So there's an office and a whatever that comes with that, right? I always wonder how that works when like the lovely stories that we have on the news here, the real hard news where they have the 5-year-old is mayor of this town or whatever. Like, how does that work, But
the cat is the mayor.
Yeah, or the animal or whatever. It's crazy. What else? Yeah, Stacy.
Like under an act or behavior, like having empathy.
Yeah.
In your leader.
Kind of the way a posture, no matter what you do, here's something you bring into that, right? And there are some things that if a leader doesn't have, it's really difficult for them to be effective, right?
I've experienced it both ways. So.
Yeah, Haley.
To go along with what Tim said, I guess I think of like mentorship perhaps as a more of a skills perspective and transformational process. Because just thinking back about my personal experiences as a leader have usually involved me in encouraging
my sisters that were in my sorority, the
Mhm.
younger ones, to be able to fill leadership roles and like, you can do this. Like,
Yeah.
what do you want to do? Like, you can, like, I promise you'll be able to do this, and like really like encouraging them to develop their own skills.
Mhm. There's also leaders at different levels, right? So that's a different leader than an official that's been elected as the governor, right? I mean, they're both leadership roles, right? There's formal and informal. We're going to talk about that, right? So I just want you to think about, these are just some examples. The following, for Northouse, the following are key components, okay? Leadership is a process. I can't make Mary follow me, or I can't make myself be a leader to Mary if Mary doesn't come with me, right? There's something in the exchange, the process of what happens. Leadership involves influence at some level, change or different way of thinking or behaving or acting as a group or individual. Leadership occurs in groups, and it usually, and it involves some common goals. So if those four elements are key for Northouse, he says, leadership is a process whereby an individual influences a group of individuals to achieve a common goal. At a really basic level, that's the way he puts it together. What do you think of that? Could you live with that? Is there something significant missing?
So there needs to be a balance of all of those.
Yeah, for sure.
Because if you're a leader who has a lot of influence vis-a-vis the politician who gets voted in because he or she are bringing all that influence, but they aren't very good decision makers, or they aren't very good persons.
And this doesn't say good leadership or bad leadership either, does it? It just says leadership. Yeah, Tim.
I mean, I think there are situations in which leadership occurs outside of groups.
Yeah, say more.
In which, say, you're a leader in your field.
Yeah.
In which you might not actually be working with a team.
Like it might be an idea.
A
concept.
And
okay.
You are building this, and you can actually be like held up in an ivory tower, and other people might be learning and being able to expand upon your work, but you actually aren't doing any of that.
So there would be, let's see if I'm following you. I think I'm imagining what you're saying. Influences a field or a discipline or, right, towards some goal that they're about, right? So this might, this may be a way passive group of individuals, but in some ways, eventually, if they're in the field, they might be influenced, but it's more a field, right? A field of study, right? Yep, I think that's a fair nuance to think about this, right? I think of in cancer research or something like that, right? Okay. Well, I want you to play with this. I don't want you to just drink the Kool-Aid. Do you know what I'm like? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I want you to be critical and wonder. Both leaders and followers are involved in leadership. Just so you know, you cannot lead by yourself. If no one is following, you are not leading. Just saying.
But if I'm super loud, then they'll have to follow.
That's some people's strategy, right? Right? They're just so far behind, I can't see them at the moment, right? It could be that, right?
Maybe they're even ahead.
Oh, you're just a clueless leader, right? No. Here's my suggestion on this. And I have a great little illustration that came up in my PhD research. If you can't see your followers or you don't understand how the relationship works, there's maybe a little bit of a problem, right? In that dynamic. So here's the story. So I was studying congregations for my PhD work, and I interviewed this pastor. Came from a very large Lutheran church here that he worked as a layperson, finished his MDiv, got sent to a first call in Southern California. There were less people in that congregation than there were on staff at his church that he came from, right? So totally different world, right? This church had kind of thought they were going to die and chose not to die and came him. So he was trying to lead like death and resurrection. They kind of knew they were going to a new place, but they didn't know how to do it. They didn't know kind of what to do. And so they were open to him leading, but he's like, he had to watch his pace. Does that make sense? He had to, they had to learn all kinds of new vocabulary. And he said, I lead this church, this congregation like this. And he said, my father-in-law and I trained for a marathon. And our goal was to finish this marathon. It had some goals, had some times, right? Okay. And he said, and we got to about, X point, about halfway or so into the marathon, and my father-in-law pulled a muscle. And he's like, I had a decision to make at that point. What happens? Do we make a new goal? What's the deal? And he said, no, my goal was we're finishing this marathon. So, but I knew if that was our goal, we couldn't go at the pace that I was going at that we had set, and we couldn't go at his pace, which was like walking. Okay. We needed somewhere between what we were going to do and walking or almost stopping. Right. And so he said, this is what I did. Said, I would run, I backed off my pace, but I didn't go to his pace, and I go just a little bit. Right. And so I was in front of him, but I have to keep looking. And when I got too far ahead, I'd have to go, whoa. And I go back and I'm like, how are we doing? Come on, let's, talk with him for a little bit, and then kind of go and kind of pull him into the future, right? But he said, I knew if I got too far ahead, his spirit would just crash, right? But I knew that it's almost like the fire was going behind. If we went his pace, we were just going to crash. We weren't going to make it, right, to the new thing. And he said, that's the best leadership lesson I've ever had for leading people through change. I've got to both, where are we going, and be looking over my shoulder, how are we doing, right? And be doing this kind of dance thing, right? Come on, right? And so sometimes that was like encouragement, sometimes that was modeling new behavior, whatever, okay? So leaders and followers are closely related, yet it is a leader who often initiates the relationship, creates the communication links, and carries the burden of maintaining it. That's the example in that, right? The leader said, no, it's my job now going to be to kind of help us move forward, right? See if we can achieve that goal. All right, now I'm going to go through just some of these different views of leadership, right? Trait versus process. This is, many theories have combinations of these, okay? But if these are like, trait is the highest thing and process is the highest thing, right? On a continuum, that's kind of what this is. So the trait viewpoint conceptualizes leadership as a property or set of properties that possessed to some degree by different people. So, to use strength finders, everybody can lead, you just lead differently based on what your strengths are. And if you can live out of your strengths, you can lead. Well, live out of your strengths and then team with other people. That's how they would say it, probably, right? That's trait, okay? Later on today, some of us are going to talk about innovation. Right, Adane? Right, Aretha? Yeah, we're going to talk about innovation. There are some characteristics, some capacities that are really helpful for innovation, right? It doesn't mean you can't innovate without them, but boy, it really helps if you learn some of them. Okay, that's something we're going to talk about today. So the process viewpoint suggests that leadership is a phenomenon. It's something that resides in the context of interaction. So leadership is not Venetius or Terry. It's what happens in between, right? It's that space in between. Sorry, I went off the screen. It's what happens in the dynamic that you can't neatly describe, right? And it makes that interaction is what makes leadership then available to everyone, right? So, quoting Mary from earlier, right? A lot of people could facilitate the process that I happened to facilitate last week. We have some guidelines. We're willing to kind of live into those things. That's a leadership role at some level. It's the process, right? It was the interaction that was powerful. It wasn't what Mary did. Now, Venetia's pointed out Mary had a role in it, right? But the powerful thing was the in-between. Okay? Yeah.
It almost,
Gia.
when I was reading the article, and I really liked the discussion surrounding the process and the interaction, because it sounded like relationship.
It did. Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So it sounded like leadership, just in the way that he described it. It sounded to me like leadership couldn't be effective without relationship, right? And I kind of paused for a minute, because I didn't know how I felt about that. Like, and I feel like that for me, that makes sense to me.
Right.
But I don't necessarily know if that is the only way.
Right.
And so I was wondering if maybe I was reading too much into it. Did anybody else get that out of that? Where that interaction, or where it's two-way street.
Right.
You know, and I would like to believe that that's true. But I don't know. When you think about other examples of leadership around us, or in our world, or in our country.
Would anybody have a comment to Gia's thing? Beth?
I think the relationship is more active one in some situations, and sometimes more passive. I'm thinking of a very large church, a couple thousand members. Most members on Sunday morning are not going to have much of a relationship with the senior pastor.
Right.
Just because. But they do give usually a hymn. By virtue of being there and continuing and participating in the organization, there is some relationship there. But it's a distant and disengagement. Okay. Have a closer leadership relationship with somebody else. So maybe some levels.
Mm-hmm.
Does that help?
Yeah, they're like levels of relationship versus the type of relationship that I envision.
Footpost. Yeah.
And like for a long time, church leadership is institutional.
Right.
So it's not, we don't always have, for the most part, community-raised leaders. Right. In the way that I have to be in relationship with a bishop or a candidacy committee or a pastor who I may have no relationship with, nor have a hard acceptance of their leadership. But I have to live within the boundaries of an institution. Yeah. So is that leadership? That's just a question.
Yeah. Well, and I think in both of those situations, what Beth said and what Flo said about in those cases, relationship fits and other things, right?
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it's not relationships, but there are other layers to it. It's not maybe primarily or not only led. I don't know. Well, and I would agree with you on my own leadership style, Gia. I can't teach. Somebody maybe could teach by just going one way. But is that learning? Like for me, right? There has to be this give and take. And for me, leadership is the same way, right? I can say, we're going here, pack your bags, and your behaviors can do something. But if there's not that mutual exchange, that doesn't feel like leadership.
Right.
That feels like.
Because then there's no listening.
Right.
And if there's no listening.
Or adapting or jazz or whatever. Yeah. And I think that's where process says, I mean, that's, I guess, what I'm saying. Process highlights that part of it, right? The phenomenon. And I think, I mean, one could say this around pastoral care or other kinds of ministries as well, right? Like pastoral care is not just, I prayed with you, right? That maybe wasn't what my job was. My job was to care, right? So, yeah, no, great questions. Here's an example of this little thing. So I love this. So leaders are this tall, have this intelligence, are extroverted, have these fluencies, and have these traits. And if they do that, then people follow, right? That's an oversimplification. And here's the back and forth exchange, right? Just an image to go with that. Assigned versus emergent. I think this one came up. I think maybe Tim brought it up. Stacy already knows this, but if you get a call, when you get a call, just because you are assigned a pastoral position doesn't mean you have all the power and authority that comes with a pastor being in that context, right? I think sometimes or the person elected official or whatever, right? There's this sense of leadership based on occupying a position, right? You are now the council chairperson, or you are now the youth director, or you are now the pastor, right? That's one view of leadership, has an assigned position. Yet the person assigned to that position does not always become the real leader. And you sometimes find that out the hard way, right? And so how to live into that takes time. Although we also know the second one, the emergent leader, without the assigned position can only go so far, right? There's a number of literature that's coming out about how to lead from the second chair, or how to be actually an influential leader when there's assigned someplace else, right? Some of you that are in Candidacy Word and Sacrament know there's a ceiling you keep hitting, right? Around until you have an official thing, you can't touch those things or do those things, or, they do that, right? Or they kind of say, do it, but don't tell anybody, right? Because there's a gap, right? So, but emergent leadership is when the people have said, so again, Stacy, when you go to the place and they ask a question and everybody looks to Bethany, or I don't know, somebody, right? She might be the one that has the leadership in that setting, right? That people have given or are looking to someone, right? Successful emergent leadership is often the result of being these things: verbally involved, informed, seeking others' opinions, initiating new ideas, and being firm but not rigid. Like, what are you about, right? But bringing in other people. Assigned versus emergent. We'll keep going on that one. Leadership and power. We could probably talk for a long time on this one in this class, right? Power is the capacity or potential to influence. People have power when they have the ability to affect others' behaviors, attitudes, and course of action. And I added this note: power involves systems in which one is leading. So, for example, you could have power in one system and switch systems and not have power. Do you know what I'm saying? Assigned or emergent, right? So let's use some of our international students. You maybe had a role that you had and a known entity as a leader, and you came to this foreign land and they're like, who are you? And you had to it's all at zero, right? And it's all about power, or there's a level of it that's about power. It's not that you don't know what you didn't know before. It's not that you don't have those abilities. It's that the system around you changed, right? With regard to that. So power is this weird thing. It's invisible and visible all at the same time, right? 5 things that they acknowledge with power. So I'll just go, I think it's easier to go this way. Referent power, based on followers' identification and liking for the leader. A teacher who is adored, right? So that's, the personal power comes because people see things in you and give you stuff. They like you, right? Expert power, followers' perception on your competency. You know stuff, right? If I was going to try and be a music leader and I couldn't play the piano or sing very well, I probably wouldn't do very well, right? But somebody that was an expert would do that, right? legitimate power associated with having status or a formal job, authority, right? So somebody that more like a sign, right? Reward power derived from having the capacity to provide rewards to others, right? So people know, hey, if you do this, this has benefits, right? And coercive power are ones where derived from having to penalize or punish. So this is rewards. This is, you know, I'll give you detention, or it's the negative side of this one. Does that make sense? Okay. These powers increase the leader's capacity to influence the attitudes, values, and behaviors of others, right? Teachers of middle school, try every one of these, I think. You know? What? And high school, yeah. Right? And so the sense of how do you dance, right, with regard to this. And I think that this is one of the, how do I say that? I'm all the things I'm thinking of aren't very teacherly and nice. These are the things, if we don't pay attention to power, it's going to disrupt. Power is being disrupted, right? If we think, let's get back to the institution, right? If we think, well, the power is just in the system, right? And you both assume that and trust that and don't question it, it could turn on a dime these days, right? So that's one source of disruption. If you just assume you don't have to pay attention to power, that will get you, right? I mean, there's all kinds of ways that I think we in the church have underestimated the power conversations that we can have healthy conversations about. They don't have to be, and we're better doing it not in the midst of a heated fight, right? Of just creating ways to talk and think about power. Haley.
I think too an important aspect is, this wasn't a different reading for a different class, but just kind of like the quadrant of like aware and empowered, unaware and disempowered,
yes,
like that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And like trying to avoid the unaware and empowered, where you don't realize like the type of power that you bring to a situation, and like how that can really do harm. I think might be something that like new seminarians might need to like think about, especially going into a congregation of like, now that you have that power, like you have a power that you need to be aware of. And is part of, and recognizing that if you have power in a system, what do you do with that, right? For good. I think that's what you're asking us, right? And to say maybe part of your power is inviting, setting the table, setting a conversation, right? To avoid doing harm.
Yeah. Rather. And maybe even good, being proactive on things,
to
right?
do good and to avoid harm.
Yeah. Yeah. So leadership and power, important. Leadership and management are similar and different. Both involve influence, work with people, and have a common goal. But leadership and management are different in the sense that leadership has a longer history, not as a discipline, but in leading and thinking about leading, right? And management is a product of the industrial age. Management was created, and I think this is really important. I will say that the most tension I've had leading in congregational systems comes at is not theology or not theology, it's leadership and management, and understanding they're going after two very different things. Management was created to reduce chaos. Just so you know, ministry is often chaotic. I'm just saying. And the Spirit is not always working on a spreadsheet. Anyway, just saying. And it was about how to make organizations be effective and efficient. Now, there are things that it's good. Like your checkbook should balance. Don't like put stuff in your pocket rather than, in the bank. As a pastor or a lay leader, that's bad. Don't do that, okay? However, like when I hear people saying, pastor, youth worker, whatever, how many hours are you in the building, and what are you doing when you're not here, and things. I'm like, what's the driving force here? Then I start asking other questions, right? And so the primary functions of management are this: planning, organizing, staffing, and controlling. Planning. Like, okay, let's have a musician at worship, and let's have somebody preach, and like, let's let people know where we're going to gather. All really.
And what time?
And what time.
And the time change happening.
All of those are really good things to plan, right? But we don't need to micromanage every aspect for it to be a vibrant worship, right? There's a level of planning that maybe each of your organizations are going to have to figure out, right? Are we over planning? One of my big things is, I don't know why I'm on pet peeves today. Anyway, is if smaller congregations that put like huge percentage of their resources into worship for like 50 people and ignore caring for being in the, like all these other areas of ministry because they're getting the bulletins just right and they're doing all this, when frankly, maybe it's fine if it's not so neat and tidy for the sake of you're doing ministry with your neighbor. Right? Or maybe some volunteer could do that. I don't know. Anyway, I just think we have over-planned some things at the expense of like caring for the world, like a really generic term, but like fill in the blank with what that might be. Or being present with people, which is a leadership thing, right? Like, go meet the people. Anyway, okay, sorry. Off my soapbox. All right. We can organize things. We should staff, and staff is just not paid. It's like, who's going to, clean up? Who's going to do all that stuff, right? So that's management. Leadership, this is Cotter, 1990, his stuff on leadership and management. And he said the overriding function of management is providing order and consistency. And the primary function of leadership is to reduce movement and change. I can manage stuff, but I ultimately want that to serve the leadership, not the other way around. Some pastors or primary leaders of congregations have been held hostage by their management people, their bookkeeper, their whoever, right? And I'm like, I think it's supposed to go the other way around. Now, don't be abusive of management. That's not what I'm suggesting, right? And here's the tension. Management is going to go, we need it to be orderly. We need it to be predictable. They're going to want to go this way. And leadership, if they're about change and movement, are going to go, yeah, let's just go. They're pushing it out and they're trying to go into the new places. So there's an automatic tension here.
Okay, so I'm a visual
learner. Yeah.
So I'm kind of, this was a little bit confusing for me.
Yeah.
The difference between these
Totally.
two. And when I'm listening to you, it sounds like management is not necessarily a good thing, right? Like, or a positive thing. So in my mind, I'm trying to figure out what a Venn diagram would look like.
Yeah.
Between these two.
Yeah.
Right?
So
Like,
let's use this chart.
Okay.
I like this chart.
Mm-hmm.
It comes from his book. They just had here, but let's put these in circles. Okay. So let's look at managing and planning and budgeting, right? So we're going to have a monthly check-in on the budget. Probably a good thing to do, right? And we're going to set some timelines to say we know our money doesn't come in a congregation equal all the time. So we're going to plan to know that it's drought here and it's higher here and we still have the same amount of bills. So we're going to plot that out, okay? And we're going to allocate resources so that the youth have some stuff and the worship people have stuff and we can still pay the bills, right? All good, right? Are you with me? Like, those are good things. This place is going to say, and where are we going? And why are we doing it? So I'm for doing all that, but how does our going to the youth ministry and our going to worship and our paying the bills help us be God's people in this location? So I'm going to ask those set of questions, right? And you're going to do this work. So the Venn diagram would be the conversation in the middle. Does that make sense?
Right.
And some people can do both of these, but a lot of times these are two different people.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So this is where the conversation happens,
Okay.
or this is where a group of people come together, right, to talk about this. And then they could say, so, all right, I get that where we are and where we want to be, there's a gap. So tell me some let's work on some strategies. So these people are like going annually, monthly. These people are going 2 years out. How's next year going to be different, right? So we're moving this thing to a new reality, not just doing the engine.
So management is like maintenance, maintaining what's already here, present, in my mind.
Yeah.
And leadership is like future.
Well, and it could be maintenance, or it could be, let's be good stewards of our house, right? If you can open it that way, because it might be that we're poor at it right now. I mean, there are some people that got this, but they can't balance their checkbook, and that's getting in the way of them getting to a new place, right? So they need a little bit more structure, right? So the other way to think about it visually is these two could be equal with an overlap, or one could be bigger.
Okay.
Does that make sense? And we need, I think they're better balanced, right?
Yeah.
So they're a dialogue and following, right? And honestly, managers want to know to what end. So that's where they're your buddy, right? Well, buddies, that may be pushing it too far, but they're like, you help me, tell me where are we going, and I can help create timelines, right? Haley.
How I kind of am like thinking of that is like our project, the first part of our project of how we had to discuss like the mission and values of the context that we were studying, and then looking at their financial statements and seeing how that like relates to like their financial statements. So like are their finances like pushing them towards their value and their mission, or is there like a disconnect? I guess might be a way to like relate it to something we've explicitly done in class.
Yep. Yeah, Aretha.
It's a confusing thing. My question is, do we have leaders in a management setting? Do we truly have leaders in a set of management thing? Do we find them?
That's a really good question. That's an MTH level question. Way to go.
There are rules that are set up. Do this. You are the leader for this group.
Yeah.
So these are the rules.
Yeah.
So can that person be called a manager or a leader?
What do you guys think about our question? Ian.
I think at my church we have a pastor who preaches from the pulpit and is very he has a difficult time being grounded. And so we have an associate pastor who grounds him. The associate pastor who's more visible in the pulpit is the leadership focused pastor. So, but both of them are essential because, and both would say that Micah, who's in the pulpit, is always thinking down the road, and that distracts him from the here and now and what the current problems are. So I think it takes a certain type of leadership. I mean, I would say that Jenna is our associate pastor, and she has enough leadership in her management role to say, I've been given the role of leadership here, and part of my role is to say to those who are outside of my realm that I have a grasp on something that you should listen to. So part of Jenna's leadership is to say, Micah, you are leading us down the right path, but you are blind to what is here and now. And so I think part of that leadership is helping others identify what they might not be, what might not be seen.
So he would be here.
Yeah.
She would be here.
Yeah.
And she's working with other people here.
Yeah, yeah. And she naturally comes from more management.
Yeah.
They're trying to meet the middle.
So one way to answer that question, if we're using Ian's example, is maybe the person here is empowering and leading people to do this work, right? Again, if we go by the leadership definition, to do some change. So to say, well, I'm helping Luther live into its new vision. I'm a sub-team point person. We have 3 sub-teams in it. I'm asking them to put some of this stuff in place for our team, right? So that you're leading a process, right? To get some of this more management done. That could be one way to answer that question.
So when you delete one of the areas, then you are not a good leader.
It's a good question, right? If we ignore it or erase it, right?
The management side is okay, I'm just going to deal with the leadership side. I'm happy.
You probably don't sustain for very long, right? Right? Right. Yeah.
I really
sure.
like this balanced against the 7 habits of highly effective people, the difference between important and urgent.
Yes.
And that the important things have to take priority over the urgent. And the important things can include the budget in practical matters and the vision of where we're going to go.
Yeah.
Both.
Yep. And that would be, to use a spiritual word, discernment, right? That sense of how do we discern right now what is urgent and what's important. Yeah, that's helpful. Let's just do, this is about people and how we work, right? Communicating goals, seeking commitment, and building teams and coalitions. This is buy-in. That's different than creating the org structure and doing reviews for people, right? This might help this, right? And this alone might not be enough because it might just be chaotic, getting to your point, Arisa, right? Right? This is motivation and inspiration. This is like filling up the fuel tank. If we don't know, why we're doing what we're doing, and if we don't believe it's going to make a difference, this can be all in alignment, and we're just cutting along, and we might just die, right? And so some of this is, why we need this to come from somewhere. This inspiration and motivation. But inspiration and motivation without any way to make it happen is empty. Right? Does that help Gia to kind of think about these in some different kinds of ways?
Taking notes on it.
Yeah.
Because it can be confusing. And what I really appreciate is that you said that it is almost 2 different roles.
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes we assume,
for sure,
right, that we can manage both.
Yeah. Right.
And it's great to be able to see the value of each role.
Right.
And where the intersection happens and where it should be happening.
Well, and I like that functions, right? This is work. What if we name the work and then say, who are the people? Right? And who needs to be the assigned, right? Like Ian's idea of the pastors have assigned roles, right? But they might be leaders within that we need to bring into that work because they're just darn better at it, right? And frankly, we need them to, and we can't do it all, right? So if these are functions, then we can begin to map out what needs to be done and by whom, right? And then, so let's just say a leader has an assigned position and you fall more here and you need this, right? This one might be saying, all right, I just need to, on a regular basis, find people and then be touching base and then get out of the way. Because sometimes you get in the way and you mess it up because it's not your gift set. right? Joe's smiling. He knows somebody in that.
I know, I'm thinking of real situations.
Right, and you see it, right? You see it, but this chart, at least for me, helps me understand, oh, this is what's going on here.
Right, and I can see where my blind spots are.
Right, for sure.
Chart. It's a helpful chart.
Yeah, Haley.
And I wonder too if like when you're working in a team, if there's like different tasks that you can perhaps be the leader on and like perhaps
Right,
be the manager
yes.
on.
Yeah,
And I
for
just
sure.
think I just think specifically of like my employment as a community life fellow. Like there's some events that I can be the leader on, where there's other events I just don't know how to host, and so I take more of a management of like, okay, well you need this and this and this, and I'll get that done.
Or there's a point where like, we only need so many leaders.
Yeah.
And we might need some managers. I mean, some of it is like, I don't know, I'll do this. What do you want? You know, like, so giving each other permission, right? This is maybe an obvious statement, but leadership in the church is more than traits, transactions, collective action, and achieving a goal. Yes? Okay, good. Just checking. So what are we called to lead and who are we called to lead? What's the difference of those two questions? Okay, what and who? But unpack it for me. What am I getting at?
What will bring to my attention an institution? Who will bring to my attention the people? That I have to work with.
Yep. Who are all of these faces, right?
And
both known and unknown, right?
too.
Yep. And what is kind of, what's the space that I, worship, whatever, right? That could be an example.
At least in my work, I feel like maybe for everyone else too, like the who drives the what. Like the what wouldn't even matter if it wasn't for the who.
I feel like this is a Dr. Seuss rhyme.
I know, right?
And that Joe's gonna stand up and start doing something with it, but
yeah,
okay.
The people, I think, like, are the heart of the work. Like whatever else it is, doesn't even matter if not.
I'm just gonna play devil's advocate just for a minute.
Yeah, you can.
But to what end are you gonna relate with people, Joe?
To what end am I gonna relate? Oh yeah, I guess it's circular, right?
Right.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, I think they're interconnected. I see that. Yeah.
So, in your work, in your call, what are the what and the who?
Yeah, I think about like the direct community that I'm in North Minneapolis.
Yeah.
I think about those people.
So the who is a neighborhood, the people that live in a geography. Okay.
Yeah. The what? We talk a lot about like finding a sense of healing, building relationship, building community. That's the what, I think.
Yeah. Did you see how he played with that?
Kind of indestructible.
No, but
yeah.
Right? You're not just like Karen for North Minneapolis. You have a vision of the people that's different than what's real in front of you. You have a vision of abundant living, whatever that could look like, right?
Yeah.
That you want to see come to be.
Yeah.
Right?
That's the way.
Beth.
Where is God here?
That's the question.
And are we centered around God, or are we centered somewhere else? There's some of that in the who and the what both.
So maybe if Joe has the arrows going this and this, right?
Put God between the arrows.
Yeah.
We're circulating around.
Maybe.
Because how are we as the church different than?
Wait, we need Lois Malcolm's paired creases, right? Dance.
Yeah, that's why I see the inward, outward flow of it all. And I think I see God in all of it. God's in the way of the for sure. Yeah.
What else? How else would you answer this?
I guess when I think about the difference between the two, the what seems like something that can be changed, like technically, I can't say that word.
Yeah.
Like
your what can change.
Like
is that what you're saying?
technically.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. Like, you can say like, okay, well, this isn't working here in this system, so we'll do this.
Okay.
Where like the people like who is more of like an adaptive like thought process change. rather
Oh,
than
I see what
just,
you're saying.
Like ascribing a technical change to like the people you're trying to.
Huh, that's interesting. So the who is, I think this is similar to kind of where you're getting, Joe. The people are really what matters, are critical, you're saying.
Yeah.
We want to get at their heart, their being, and there's different whats we can do to get at that.
Well, because
Is that another way to say it?
And I mean, essentially, like Joe was saying, any technical change you want to make to some system behind the what isn't gonna be effective.
Yeah.
Unless you can make some type of adaptive change with people.
With the who, okay. What else, Donnie?
This kind of question, what we are called to live. In my context, it's more concentrated with community of faith as Christians. And if we speak about leading the community outside of the church, because it's own problem, and you may face some problem, and there's that kind of problem that is within the youth of my team. And we are just restricted and just only speaking about the community of faith in the church. And we are not allowed publicly to speak that we are all to serve the people in the church as well as outside the church.
So thinking of what we're called to lead as a body, is it actual community, right? And then who are we called to lead? The question is already there, not there, internally, externally? Well, I don't, this isn't meant to be a puzzle, and I'm not looking for a particular answer. What I am suggesting, though, is as we ask all these leadership questions, we have to ask, what are we leading? And who are we bringing in this process to? Because it changes everything, right? We're not going to do this because we spent more time on the other thing, and I want to get to what they are. But I want to challenge you to think about this, and this might be an exercise you do with the community, right? Who are people in the Bible that are exemplary, or that, not that they got it perfect, I don't mean it that way, but that lift up what biblical leadership is, right? We have a lot of examples in the Bible of real idiots, but they were faithful, right? They didn't make a mistake and then run away. They came back, and over time, it changed, right? That gives me hope. I like that, right? The fact that not everyone got it the first time, right, is my point of that, right? So one thing we could do is we could look at a leader biblically in the narrative and says, what do we learn from leadership, about the who and what of leadership from the Bible, right? I find that an interesting way, but it's not the only way, right? Texts, what do texts tell us about what biblical leadership or Christian leadership would be, right? So you could pick a text and you could dwell in that and say, what does this say about leadership? Or you could pick the book of Acts, a book or something, and say, what does this tell us about leadership? And wonder about it, okay? We could also say, we know some things about God, right? And based on who God is, what does this say about leadership? Okay? This is now a whole nother degree program, right? And we're going to be done in 25 minutes. So we're not going to go down that. But I want to open you up to say, we've got leadership theory, but I want us to really think there's a whole body of work that we can tap into to think about leadership from a Christian perspective. And some of those things will, like leadership and management, will overlap, and some of them will be in tension. Okay? So that's what you get to do, is in your work. We're just going to say a few things on the Van Gelder reading. Beth brought it up. I'm sorry that the PDF had the every other page version, that there's some pages missing. So I will work to get that fixed. We had that happen at another class, and that, I'm sorry, but that happened. And so there's some reading, there's some part of the text that's there, that's missing. So I will get that up and replaced. His commitment is that we're an age of the Spirit, and the Spirit is really, really critical as we think about leadership in ministry today. So those of you, that, well, I don't know. I think it's kind of freeing. I think it kind of helps us think about it. So just some key points from Van Gelder. The ministry of the Spirit in the Old Testament, creation and redemption. God's Spirit empowers God's people with gifts and abilities. We see that throughout, but certainly that's come from the Old Testament. Spirit uses people to restore community. That redemptive act of bringing people together. The Spirit exposes and confronts evil. The Spirit uses faith community to express mercy and extend justice. And the Spirit reveals the promised Messiah and hope in the future. That alone would be a leadership commission. That would take at least a lifetime, right? What can we learn about the Spirit from the New Testament, particularly this one in the Gospels? When we do Acts next. The Spirit is involved in the birth of Jesus. The Spirit was involved in Jesus' life and ministry. Salvation was introduced in the fullness of Jesus' life and ministry. And Jesus promised the Spirit, the ministry of the Spirit in the church. Kind of what's coming. And then we have Acts. The Spirit creates a new type of reconciled community. So we have the Old Testament chosen people, and then we have the Jews and Gentiles into the ends of the earth, right? The Spirit gives and empowers leadership to guide communities. The Spirit leads communities into sanctified life and are living a new nature in Christ. The Spirit leads communities into active ministry, and the Spirit leads communities into the world to expose evil and the ministry of suffering service. So some of this is an extension, right, with regard to that. If we are to lead in the midst of real contexts, and that these real contexts are always changing, then the church is always forming and reforming. Agree or disagree with that statement? Yes? Here, the confessional and missional, the sense of confession is that we're forming around some beliefs, some things we say to be true, right? And missional in the sake that it's always reforming in light of what's happening in the world. Okay? That those things are at play. If the gospel is good news for every context, then it must embody the promise that is embedded in the incarnation that became flesh. So what does it mean for the church to embody the promise incarnationally? To have it be a foretaste and a witness to that. I'm going to say these, and then I want you to just get in pairs and talk about this Van Gelder thing, these slides together, okay? So he says, Van Gelder says, aptitudes for Spirit-led missional congregations in context. Here's some things. We have to learn to read the context and ask, what is God doing, and what does God want us or invite us to do in light of that? That's the in conversation with the context. Secondly, if we're always being formed and reformed, how are we anticipating new insights into the gospel as we're encountering others? Are we allowing ourselves to be surprised? Are we anticipating reciprocity, having others change us? What does it mean to understand the context and they're the particular? All communities are always located in a time and place. What does it mean to be living in that time and place? And understand that ministry is always contextual and therefore practical. Ministry is always normed by scripture and engaged in ministering to real people in real neighborhoods like Joe's talking about. And there's particularities of those that we need to pay attention to. All right, so 10 minutes, go back into some conversation groups, talk about what you learned from Van Gelder, what we just talked about here, and then go back to your definition of leadership and what's one or two things you would add, given our conversation about theory and Van Gelder's view of the Spirit. Okay? 10 minutes, go. Who would like to be online? Sure. It's just one. Oh, it's B. That's me.
Okay, so I can't tell if my brain is just working too slowly right now or if what she's saying makes no sense.
Your brain must be working really slow.
Okay, good. I was like, or maybe it's just like so obvious that I'm like, why are we talking?
No, I think, I don't know. Because I'm on like the last leg of my tour. I feel like this is stuff, if I don't know it by now, I shouldn't be in ministry. You know, like from all the CPL classes that I took through, children, youth, and family, and, just systematics, just all of it. And, I took the Holy Spirit class this summer, and like all those pieces have to be taken into consideration when you're thinking about leadership or leadership and management.
Yeah.
And I don't think leadership, I think you can have management and be a leader.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you can have management and have leadership as well. I don't think there's ever one without the other in some form.
Unless it's a disaster, unless you create a disaster. Like I can think of an example.
Sure.
With the congregation that I've been affiliated with in my life, and this pastor, she actually thinks that like people who do the particulars are bad. So she starts these things and doesn't have any following or support, or like doesn't really even know if her people are behind her. And the people that do come behind her because they either value her or they think that like the principle behind what she's doing is correct, or they just don't care. Mm-hmm. But then the people that disagree with her are, in her opinion, like terrible people. Mm-hmm. And so they started this group at the church and didn't discuss it at all with the neighbors. And it's like drastically impacting the neighbors now. Oh. And all of the neighbors they're going to like city council to try to get it shut down because she didn't talk to them ahead of time. Mm-hmm. Like didn't do any of the management portion. Mm-hmm. She's leading, but mm-hmm. in theory what she's doing is good. But yeah, so I think I agree with you that like for it to be good in any way, you have to have at least a little bit of both.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know.
Did you do the readings? I don't think I've read much of anything in this class.
I was thinking about that. I was like, ooh, I should probably do at least a little bit of it because I'm going to have to like reference things for this final paper. And I do really want to pass this class because I just want to be done. It's my second to last credit. Like,
woot woot.
I'm done. I don't care anymore. I'm done. Ugh.
You got all your did you do your approval interview already?
Mm-mm.
No. When is that?
I don't know. I'm doing early approval. Well, I have to be approved for early approval.
Well, yeah.
Fine.
It's a joke.
Yeah. Well, apparently my committee is going to like vote on it.
What?
I know. And I was like, I wasn't aware that this was maybe going to be an issue. I don't think that it's a problem. I think that they're just.
They got to have control.
Yeah.
Management.
It is sort of the Minneapolis area Synod. I think sometimes they're like, you all just do whatever you want to do. We got to get at least some sort of semblance of control over you. So they're going to vote on whether or not to approve my early approval request.
And then you have to submit an email to the context office too.
Which I already did.
Yeah.
Pending my approval from a candidacy committee, I should be fine.
Okay.
But
you'll be fine.
Yeah.
You'll be great.
Yeah. I'm not worried about it. I can't imagine that they would be like, oh yeah, by the way, Brigitte, we do want you to just sit around for a year.
Right? I know. The context office was going to hold my approval.
Really?
My early approval. And I'm thinking, I told Dr. Malcolm is my mentor on campus or my faculty advisor, and she goes, are they freaking crazy? Do they realize that we need people out in the field? What do they think they're doing? Do you want me to write them an email? I'm like, no. I said, if they deny it, we'll get after them then. But it just I feel like it was a power trip for Karen. I don't really care for her at all. I had a really hard time with her. But anyway, it's done, and
I think that's like the nature of everyone in that office is that they have so much control and power that like with any one person, if you have a positive experience with them, they're fantastic. And if you have a negative experience with them, then they're the worst.
Yeah.
It's like not consistent at all. The reports that I hear from people.
Well, the thing is I had a really good experience with Tim when I first started.
Yeah, I remember that.
At seminary. And then when this happened, I was just like, are you kidding me? Tim's leading this office? And so I'm actually going to, I'm going to arrange for a sit down with him before I'm done.
Okay.
Because I think he needs to understand the impact that their decisions have on people, you know.
What all happened?
So I wrote my email asking for early approval, and got an email that came from the context office that Catherine Osley had signed, and said if you have any questions or need further clarifications, I was supposed to call Karen.
Okay.
So I called Karen and ask, what exactly are you guys wanting? What concern that you have to not allow me to move forward with early approval at this point? And she's like, well, you had expressed that you were interested in doing clergy coaching, and we really think that you need to follow through on that. And I'm like, okay, so what other concerns do you guys have? Because I mean that wouldn't have to be necessarily a restriction of whether or not they say yes or no.
It should have nothing to do with your internship. It's like a personal.
And that was the other thing, is she felt that she said I needed to be more of a guest in my internship site.
And because when I first started there, I was thinking about an internship project around ecumenism because they have a problem with that in that community. And it affects everybody, you know, not just pastors, but it affects the whole community.
Right.
And Karen thought that I shouldn't be thinking about that I need to step back and like basically shut up. But I asked her to clarify exactly what the team had a concern about. And she said, I can only speak for myself. And like, okay, then how is this a team decision?
Right.
You know?
Right.
So, well, we're being flagged to go back into class.
Okay. But
Miss you, girl.
Right? You know, I miss you too. It went through, right? You did early approval, obviously, because you've been assigned.
Hand up. There we go. We won't drop you, we promise.
I feel like I'm a baton in an Olympic race.
You appreciated the Old Testament?
Yeah, looking at where the Spirit appears.
Okay,
And
cool.
kind of drawing that in to where sometimes hard to get people to biblically come in to where they're headed.
Yep.
And to try and find a way to bring that into more than we're here to get some work done.
Yeah.
You know.
So to use scripture as a way to bring people into our work and what it means to lead.
Right.
Cool.
Because it's hard to get people to even say yes to coming on a council when you're in a small group.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you. What else, Vinicius?
Joe and I dwell on events claim about this dispensation being that of the Holy Spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And then he even tries to remember a passage in 1 Corinthians that Paul says, one waters, another plant, but it takes the Spirit to give increase.
Yeah.
And that sometimes in this dispensation, sometimes even forget that it takes the Holy Spirit to give us the very skills that we need to do what God wants us to do.
Yeah.
And then reflecting on leadership, he remembers something that is very popular to us in Africa that we call an African adage that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go with a group.
So the importance of community.
Right.
Yeah. I appreciate what you said about recognizing agency, right? It's not only God's agency that does the work, it's God's agency in gifting us, right? I hear both of those in what you said, Vinicius. Yep. I think just to piggyback on that, if there's one thing I'd want you to take away from this, I love leadership theory. But leadership theory is not the God, the salvation, and it is not going to change the church in the end. It is a tool. It's a hammer. It's a saw. It's a computer. It's a whatever that we have at our disposal, right? But it's God's work that we join, right? And so for me, leading is always with. And that's that surprising nature that, Kyle, just when I think I've read the right leadership book and have the right theory and I'm ready to go, then God goes, woohoo, right? And messes with me, right? Or something else happens. And so part of, I think, what I appreciate about the leadership of the Spirit is that it opens for surprise, and that's also part of a bigger, longer story that is not about me. But I get to participate. But I get to be a part of it. And you guys, then I can go to bed every night and sleep, knowing it's not going to be finished and knowing it's not mine to carry alone, right? What are some new words, new thinking about leadership that you added to your list or you're added to your thinking that you didn't start with in this day? Or you're going to think more about? Yeah, Ian.
Well, the idea of like anticipation was something that was, I think, new to me. I think it's easy to say let's see where we go, or sometimes leading, especially in Christian context, is a lot of leading into the unknown.
Yeah.
But still being able to identify ways that we can anticipate.
Yeah. Cool.
What we can anticipate and how anticipation can prepare us and also change us through that process. Nice. I think that was interesting. I had considered that before.
Yeah.
So I was just thinking of like me, like specifically how a lot of my leadership is kind of found in mentorship, and I really like this word like cultivating other people's skills, and just this discussion about the Spirit makes me wonder if I can perhaps be better at helping others like discern like their vocations or where their Spirit is leading them. Because I think I've done a little bit of that like work minus the Spirit, and so maybe just being more intentional about that work.
Cool. Thank you. Busy day. Reminder, you don't have class next week. Don't come. Deal? But we will be here the week after Thanksgiving. And don't forget you have another paper.
What time on Monday?
Just Monday. Yeah. I'm not grading it Monday night. How's that read? Yeah, Stephanie.
At 5 o'clock in OCC, there's agape tests in addition to Cup of Blessing kind of merging together. We'll get to have some food from around the country, around the world.
Thank you.
Our international students are hosting.
Yeah, awesome. All right. Thank you guys. Have a good night.
Thanks, Dr. Helson.